I feel like the Clio V6, and this could just be a me thing, is one of those cars which could easily fall between the cracks in Gran Turismo 7 in terms of returning faces, because in this sea of returning legends like the Pennzoils and the Chaparrals, cars like this, or a more recent revival of something like a Scirocco R for example, they're kind of lower stakes cars, but in the past of the franchise, especially this one more so than something like a Scirocco, it's always been a staple in the hot hatch category of Gran Turismo as recently as GT6, then of course it went away, and now it's come back. The trophy version that we used to have, which of course this is a clear homage to, of course from my Special Projects series I did a build for it to essentially recreate the trophy racing version from Gran Turismo 6. Fantastic little race car, much like the Lupo Cup cars, the Beetle Cup car, one of those slightly more niched touring car style machines within Gran Turismo, and of course a fantastic hot hatch of choice. Now funnily enough, I actually saw a Clio V6 this morning at a car meet. It was a black one, a Phase 2, which is of course the facelifted one. Fantastic looking car, and both those and these have just skyrocketed on price. I still have an issue of Evo magazine from not that long ago, in around 2006, 2007, which I guess is longer than you think really, but from around that time when the Fiat Panda 100 HP first came out, they did an issue of the magazine about 10 grand heroes, and the Clio V6 was one of those. As recently as then, you could still buy one for 10 grand used. Gone are those days now, that's for sure, because these are worth a lot. And even in the game, from the used dealer, and I believe prices do vary in there, but it's around 90 grand. So it certainly does mirror the kind of crazy pricing that real ones can have. Now, being a Phase 1 car, one of the earlier ones, it of course has slightly less power, 229 horses in the case of this one, and it's not overly light. By today's standards, I guess it's kind of light for a hatchback at 1,335 kilos, but at the time that wasn't particularly light. It does have a big engine, of course a lovely homage to the Renault 5 Maxi Turbo with the mid-engine rear drive layout, and of course easily one of the most iconic hot hatches of the 2000s. Plus on top of that, of course, the Clio V6, along with the car that I used to have, the Golf R32, and Alfa Romeo's 147 GTA, those three were pretty much like the three powerhouse hot hatches in terms of just having these big, oversized, torquey motors, and there were one or two others, but I feel like those were kind of the three kings of that, at least before stuff like the Focus RS came along, etc., and the ante got upped more and more in recent years. But what can this do in the game? Is it one of those additions that's kind of a nostalgia member berry, or is it actually a good car? Well, I feel like that's a fairly obvious question to answer on the one hand. Is it useful? Well, you can see how quick it is here tuned, and if you follow my Special Projects series, you'll probably have tried out the build, and it's really, really strong through corners, not surprisingly, because Renault knows what they're doing when it comes to making a great chassis for cornering, but also, of course, it's a member berry. That's part of the point. Of course they brought it back because it is popular with the community. But that's the thing with member berries. They're not just a gimmick. It doesn't have to be just something to get a cheap amount of love, because sometimes member berry cars can be great. If you bring back a car that really was outstanding, like a Chaparral 2J, then it's justified in being that nostalgic hit of serotonin, because it actually does live up to that. Likewise, if they brought back something like a Toyota GT1, it would probably live up to how much we loved it. It wouldn't necessarily be quite as dominant as it was, but it would be a fantastic car. This is definitely one of those, but in the more lower end, like 200 to 250 horsepower kind of camp, this one that I'm driving doesn't really have a huge difference in terms of power. Even the weight, although lower, isn't ultra light. It's around like 1150 kilos, I think it is, like the trophy car, I should say, counterpart. But even in terms of its point level, it gives you a ton to work with. Of course, racing tyres are going to bump it up pretty quick, but at least standard, it's only up around the 450-ish kind of region, which, to put that into perspective, is a similar kind of camp to some kind of classic American stuff, which, if you think of it that way, this is a lot more compact and a lot more nimble than many of those. It might not have the sheer torque or the sheer horsepower, but it certainly is no slouch. In fact, the Clio V6 I think is a deceptive car, both in real life and in the game, because it's marketed pretty much as a conventional hot hatch. It's in the wrapping of a Clio, which is a very unintimidating car. But the reality is, if you strip away that body, what you've essentially got is like a French Lotus. kind of like the Renault Sport Spider, but with an even bigger engine than that. So when you see this, you shouldn't see a Clio. You should see a sports car that happens to have a Clio body on top, like a Clio skin suit, if you will. And in practice, it does feel like that. The handling is great. And to reference once again the Chaparral, one of the things that I do like about the Clio is just like the 2J, it almost feels like you're driving a cube, because it feels like it's almost as wide as it is long, and it's not that long, but its width feels crazy. It's this little squat, well, cube of a vehicle that just feels super nimble, super manoeuvrable, and even though that can end up, because of having a short wheelbase, under certain circumstances making the car feel twitchy if you're not careful, and that's definitely there. You could step the tail out on one of these with lower grade tyres, but just like Evo magazine said in that issue, the Clio V6 is a more challenging choice of hot hatch, but it's rewarding for it. It's not just a bad car, it's a challenging professional level hot hatch, which rewards the respect that you give it, the time you put into it, and how much you learn to use it to play to its strengths. Because having that torquey engine, having that mid-engine layout, having that super wide track, which especially now looking back, really does make this one of the craziest production hot hatches ever if you really think about it. It pays off, because what you end up with is not only a fantastic investment, but genuinely a sports car in a hatchback body. So I think it's fantastic that they brought it back. Of course it's a justified member berry, but I would be interested to know for you guys, do you tend to use this one a lot? Do you not use it at all? Do you find it maybe challenging to tune and to use, or do you find it to be fantastic for maybe a certain track, a certain point level, certain event, etc.? Of course, give me your thoughts down below, but that's it for mine, and of course, I'll see you next time with more. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.